Alright everybody, get your engines fired up. It's time for Lights Out, Let's Chat.
Okay, imagine this. Palm trees, yachts that probably cost more than entire F1 teams, celebrities who may or may not know what is actually happening, and 22 drivers about to go wheel to wheel at 200 miles per hour. Welcome to Miami. In this race, it's not just another stop on the calendar, because this year, things are different. We've got rule changes happening mid-season, drivers already frustrated, teams still figuring out this new era, and Miami? Well, Miami might be where it all explodes. So today, we're breaking it all down right here. What makes Miami unique? What's changing this year? Why drivers are already complaining? And who this track actually favors. Because if you thought this season was unpredictable already, Miami might take it to a whole other level. But before we even get into the track, we need to talk about something huge. Because Formula One hasn't raced in 5 weeks. Yeah, 5 very long weeks. Which, in F1 time, that's basically forever. So why does this matter? Well, this just wasn't a normal break. This is the kind of gap where teams go back and rethink everything. Engineers are making upgrades, drivers are resetting mentally. And with the new 2026 rules already causing problems, this break came at a really interesting time. So, during these 5 weeks, teams were analyzing what's not working, trying to fix energy-saving issues, preparing for the Miami rule change. Basically, everyone's been in the lab. And here's the thing, after a long break like this, you don't actually know who's improved. Some teams come back stronger, some teams somehow get worse. F1 teams really spend 5 weeks upgrading the car just to come back like, yeah, we made it slightly confusing. So, we've got a long break, rule changes happening, and a track that already causes chaos. Which means Miami isn't easing us back in. It's throwing everyone straight into the deep end. So yeah, 5 weeks off, no one really knows what to expect. Which makes this next part even more important. What actually makes Miami so unpredictable? Okay, let's start simple, because if you're newer to Formula One, you might be thinking, okay, but it's just another race, right? No, Miami is an experience. This race happens around Hard Rock Stadium. Yes, literally around an NFL stadium. So the track is temporary. It's built specifically for the race weekend, which means grip levels are lower, track evolves a lot, mistakes happen more often. The Miami circuit is fast on straights, tight in technical sections, and honestly, a little weird. You've got long straights, which is perfect for overtaking, slow corners, which is easy to mess up on, and a very narrow sector, which basically means chaos. It's like F1 said, let's mix Monaco stress with straight line chaos and see what happens. Now let's be real. Miami isn't just about racing. It's about the celebrities, parties, and massive media attention, which adds a lot of pressure to these drivers. Because these drivers aren't just racing, they're literally performing. Alright, this is where things get really interesting. Because heading into Miami, Formula One is already changing the rules mid-season. Yeah, this isn't normal. Drivers have been complaining about something called lift and coast. Basically, instead of going full speed, drivers lift off the throttle early, coast into the corners, and save energy for later. And you're probably wondering, why is this a problem? Well, it slows the race down, it feels unnatural, and honestly, it looks kind of boring. Nobody turns on F1 thinking, I really hope they drive slower today. There's also the system called boost mode, which basically gives drivers extra power, but it's complicated. It's not consistent. Even drivers don't love using it. And if the drivers are confused, us fans are definitely confused. Of course, some of the drivers are concerned about safety. This is kind of the biggest thing, because now you've got cars that are super fast on straights, but slower in corners. That creates unpredictable speed differences, and at 200 miles per hour, that's dangerous. So, the FIA stepped in, stating that in Miami, they're adjusting a few things. Less energy saving, more flat out racing, safer performance gaps, and simpler systems. Now, this is huge because Miami is basically becoming the test race for some of these fixings. So, yeah, no pressure. Just casually fixing an entire racing era live. Here's the thing about Miami, it's not a forgiving track. And you're probably wondering, Michaela, what does that mean? Well, if your car isn't perfect, it will show. If your setup is wrong, it will show. If you're struggling with the new rules, every single person will see it. Now, here are some of the challenges. Tire management. Heat is a factor. Track grip changes constantly. And of course, braking zones. Heavy braking equals easy lockups. And of course, overtaking zones. Opportunities are there, but so is the risk. This track really said, you can pass, but are you emotionally ready for the consequences? Okay, now let's talk about the drivers. Because Miami, it's not just physical, it's mental. This is what they're going to have to deal with. New rules still not fully understood, adjustments happening mid-season, and of course, huge spotlight because, well, it's Miami. So, qualifying becomes huge here. Why? Well, because track position matters. Starting near the front means cleaner race. Starting in the traffic, well, that's chaos ready to happen. So yeah, starting in the midfield in Miami is basically good luck. May the odds ever be in your favor. Alright, we have to talk predictions here. And honestly, this race feels unpredictable. What could actually happen here? Well, strategy mistakes because of the new rules, unexpected overtakes, and possibility for safety cars. Miami is the kind of track where someone unexpected shows up and suddenly you're like, wait, when did they become really fast? F1 loves doing this thing where a team struggles for weeks at a time and then randomly in Miami, surprise, we're competitive now. So heading into Miami, here's what we're really watching. Are the rule changes actually working? Are drivers pushing more? Does the racing feel better? Because if Miami delivers, these changes stay. If it doesn't, well, more chaos is coming. Of course, fans are probably wondering, are these rule changes fixing Formula One or just covering up the bigger problems? Well, on one hand, they're improving racing, making things safer, but on the other, why were these issues there in the first place? So, honestly, it's both. Right now, they're fixing things in real time, which is super good, but long term, the sport needs stability because constant changes make it harder for teams and drivers, plus us fans. So, yeah, Miami is not just another race, it's basically a test, a turning point, and of course, chaos, which honestly is exactly what we signed up for. Alright, now for question of the week. And this one is actually really interesting, especially with everything happening right now. So, the question is, who benefits more from the 5-week break? Top teams or underdogs? Because on the surface, you might think, okay, everyone gets the same amount of time, right? So it should be equal. But in Formula One, nothing is ever that simple. Let's start with the top teams, because honestly, they might have the biggest advantage here. You might be wondering, well, why? The top teams already have more money, more engineers, better facilities, and more data. So when you give them 5 full weeks, that's 5 weeks of high level problem solving. Now, of course, with the 2026 issues, top teams are probably forced on energy deployment fixes, making lift and coast less necessary, improving how efficiently the car uses energy. They're working on aerodynamic twerks, adjusting airflow for better balance, fixing instability in corners, and of course, they are doing simulation work, running Miami setups over and over, basically predicting how the new rule twerks will behave. So why does this matter? Well, top teams don't just fix problems, they optimize everything. So even if they were already fast, they're coming back trying to be perfect. Top teams have really spent 5 weeks like, yeah, we're winning, but what if we win more comfortably? But here's where it gets more interesting. Because underdog teams, this break might actually mean more for them. Why? Well, because they've been struggling. And normally in F1, you don't get the time to fix these things. So, it's race, travel, race, repeat. Underdog teams probably used this time to bring major upgrades in, like new floor designs, updated wings, cooling adjustments, stuff that takes weeks to develop. They also probably fixed issues, like cars that were hard to drive, poor tire management, inconsistent performance, and of course, rate set strategy approach. Basically, better race planning, learning from earlier mistakes. And you're probably wondering, Michaela, why does it matter what the underdogs are doing? Well, if you're already behind, a long break is your chance to catch up. Underdog teams really came into this break like, okay, everything is broken. Let's start there. So here's the key difference. Top teams refined, underdogs rebuild. Top teams are like, we're at 90%, let's get to 100. Underdogs, though, they're like, we're at 60%. How do we make this so we're not suffering? And those are two very different challenges. Now, here's something people don't talk about enough. Not all upgrades work. Teams can spend weeks developing something and then show up to Miami like, yeah, that didn't help. So, what could go wrong? Well, new parts don't match the car, setup becomes harder to manage, and drivers lose confidence. Imagine spending 5 weeks upgrading your car and it comes back worse. I honestly would not recover from this. Obviously, we can't forget about the drivers, because the break affects them too. Top drivers stay sharp, reset mentally, come back focused. Well, the underdog drivers regain confidence, study mistakes, prepare for a fresh start. But there's a downside. Rust. 5 weeks without racing. Timing can be off. Reactions can feel different. First lap back, and they're just like, wait, this is really fast. So, who benefits more? Honestly, short term, the underdogs. But long term, top teams. And you might be asking, well, why do you say that? Here it is. Underdogs get time to fix big issues, can make noticeable jumps, but top teams eventually just push everything, and they stay ahead over time. So, this break doesn't guarantee anything, but it creates uncertainty. And in Formula One, that's where things get the most interesting. Because after 5 weeks, everyone thinks they improved. Miami is where we find out who actually did. But I want to hear from you. Who do you think benefits more? Top teams or underdogs? And more importantly, who shows up different in Miami? Let me know, because this race might surprise all of us. Alright, before I end this episode, let's get into some F1 news of the week, because there's actually a lot going on right now, and not all of it is smooth. So, starting off strong, F1 is heading into this brand new 2026 era. New cars, new engine rules, all of that. But here's the catch. They're already changing the rules mid-season. Yeah, not exactly what you want to hear when you're launching a new era. So, what's the issue? Well, drivers have been speaking out about a few major problems. Too much energy saving, a system called boost mode that's confusing and inconsistent, and even safety concerns due to the speed differences between cars. So let's break that down real quick. Energy saving is also being called lift and coast. This is when drivers have to lift off the throttle early and coast into the corners to save energy, which makes sense strategically, but from a fan's perspective, you don't tune into Formula One hoping drivers go slower. Nobody is sitting there like, wow, I really hope they conserve energy today. Of course, there's the safety concerns. Because of how these systems work, some cars end up faster on straights, but slower in the corners. That creates unpredictable speed differences. And when you've got cars moving at insane speeds, that's not really ideal. So the FIA is stepping in and making adjustments starting at the Miami Grand Prix, reducing energy saving, making racing more flat out, improving safety, and simplifying how these systems work. So, the 2026 era hasn't gone perfectly so far, but instead of waiting, they're actually fixing it in real time, which is good, but also kind of feels like building a plane while flying it. Now, this story is a little bit more serious. Some of the Formula One drivers are currently under investigation for potential tax evasion. What does this mean? Well, authorities are looking into whether certain drivers properly reported and paid taxes on their income. And in a sport like F1, we're talking about huge salaries, sponsorship deals, international earnings. So, things can get complicated pretty quickly. At this stage, these are investigations, not confirmed outcomes. So, nothing has been finalized yet. And you're probably wondering, Michaela, why does this even matter? Well, this goes beyond just money. It affects driver reputation, team image, and how the sport is viewed globally. Because Formula One is such a high profile sport, anything like this becomes major news. And it's a reminder that what happens off the track can matter just as much as what happens on the track. Okay, let's end on something a little more exciting. Turkey is officially being added back to the Formula One calendar as of next season. If you're newer to Formula One, you might be thinking, okay, why is that a big deal? Well, let me explain. The race takes place at Istanbul Park, and this is a track drivers genuinely love. It's fast, it's technical, and it has one of the most famous corners in Formula One, Turn 8. Now, Turn 8 is a long, multi-apex corner, meaning drivers are turning for a long time at high speed under constant pressure. They experience serious G-forces through that section. It's physically demanding and really easy to mess up. So, imagine trying to stay perfectly controlled while your body is being pushed sideways the entire time. Listen, I struggle holding a straight line with a coffee in my hand. I don't think I would be able to handle that turn. Now, why is it coming back? Well, Turkey has been on and off the calendar for quite some time, originally from 2005 to 2011, then made a few return appearances, and every time it comes back, fans and drivers love it. So, bringing it back helps balance new locations, fan favorite tracks, and keeping the calendar exciting. This track tends to create mistakes, tire challenges, unpredictable racing, which is exactly what we want. Now, bottom line, Turkey returning isn't just another race. It's a track that actually challenges the driver. And when drivers are challenged, that's when things get interesting. So yeah, next season just got a little bit more exciting. But on this week of F1 News of the Week, a brand new era already needing adjustments, off the track investigation adding tension, and a fan favorite track making a comeback. On or off the track, it's never quiet in this sport. Because if the racing doesn't create drama, don't worry. Formula One will find away. Alright, everyone, that is the episode. If you enjoyed this, send it to someone who still thinks F1 is just cars going into circles. Because here, we're educating people kindly. And let me know, who do you think wins Miami? Feel free to follow me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Until next time.
From Lights Out to the Checkered Flag, this has been Lights Out, Let's Chat podcast. We'll see you next time.